Go ahead and print out the notes for 10.3 and 10.4 from course documents, and let's go ahead and do that. 10.3 is mostly a review of what you've learned so far in Chapter 10, so I'm going to go ahead and make quick work of the first part. It's a review of the steps to take for solving a linear equation. So your first step is to simplify each side separately. The next step, move all of your variables to one side of the equal sign and all of your numbers to the other. You can use your addition or subtraction, your addition principle to add or subtract from both sides of the equation. Third step, you need to isolate your variable, get your variable by itself. And you do this by multiplying or dividing using the multiplication principle. And the fourth step is to check your work. You can plug in your answer into the original equation. If it's a true statement, then you know you've done your work correctly. I'm going to work two problems from the bottom of page 1. The first one is a very simple one. You have 5x plus 4 equals 19. So your first step is to simplify each side, but each side is simplified. You don't have to combine like terms or use the distribution property. So your second step is to move all of your variable terms to one side of the equation. So we're going to leave our 5x, which is our variable term, on the left side of the equation, and we're going to move the 4 to the right side by subtracting 4 from both sides. And that leaves you with 5x equals 15. Now your third step is to get x by itself, and you do that by dividing by 5. Divide by the coefficient, which is the number in front of x, and that gives you that x equals 3. And your last step is to make sure that's correct. So we're going to go back to our original equation and say 5 times 3, plugging 3 in for x, plus 4 should equal 19. 5 times 3 is 15. 15 plus 4 does equal 19, so you know that x does equal 3, and you would write it in set form like that. In the next problem, we do have to work on the first step, which is simplifying each side, so we combine like terms. On the left side of the equation, we have two terms that have w in it, so we combine it. 5w minus 2w is 3w. And I like to cross out the terms when I've done them so I don't actually do them twice. And then we're left with plus 3 minus 7, so that's the same thing as plus 3 plus negative 7, which is going to be negative 4, which we can just write like that. And the right side is already simplified. So now we can move on to step 2, which is to get the variable terms on one side of the equation and the numbers on the right. You can either move your variables to the right side or the left side of the equation. If you move it to the left side, you're going to deal with negative numbers, and if you move it to the right side, you won't. So let's go ahead and this time move to the right side. We're going to move the 3w to the right side. I knew to do that because 3w is less than 6w. So when I subtract 3w from 6w on the right, I get a positive number. 3w plus 8, and on the left, I'm left with negative 4. Now I need to get my w term by itself. That's 3w by itself, so I do that by subtracting 8 from both sides. And on my left, I get negative 12, and on my right, I get 3w. And now I need to get w by itself, so I just divide both sides by 3. And on my left I get negative 4, and on my right I get w. So the answer should be negative 4. We're going to plug that back into our original equation. 5 times negative 4 plus 3 minus 2 times negative 4 minus 7 should equal 6 times negative 4 plus 8. So on the left, 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. 6 times negative 4 is negative 24. So on the left, we have, look at the minus and negative, and remember that minus and negative is the same thing as plus a positive. So we have to do addition and subtraction from left to right. So negative 20 plus 3 is negative 17. And then on the left, you have negative 24 plus 8 is negative 16. So on the left, negative 17 plus 8 is negative 9. And then you have negative 9 minus 7 is negative 16. And the reason for that is you can rewrite it negative 9 plus negative 7, because changing subtraction to addition, if you look up here, you can just change the sign of the number and add a line to make it plus. So negative 9 plus negative 7 does equal negative 16. And so the correct answer is that W equals negative 4. And it doesn't matter if the W is on the right or the left. At this point, I'd like you to pause the video and work the other problems. Then play a little further and you'll see the solutions worked out. Here are the answers and the way they're worked out for the rest of the problems. The second and the last problem we worked out in the previous screen. In the top two problems, we're going to add the distribution property as we simplify each one. So let's go ahead and do that. I will work the second one here, and then you work the first. So we have, on the left, we have to distribute that negative sign, and to do that, we treat it as a negative 1. First we change subtraction to addition, so that gives us a negative sign in front of the parentheses, and then we're going to put a negative 1 there. I'm not to use black for that. So once we do that, we just keep writing. It's really important to be methodical. I know you want to rush through the problems, but that's how you make mistakes. So if you can write out each step, it works a lot better. So 8a plus, and we're going to distribute the negative 1, multiplying it by the 3 gives us a negative 3, and then we're going to multiply the negative 1 times the 2a, and that gives us a negative 2a. Now notice I kept it in the form of plus and negative. Okay, at this point I'm going to change it back to subtraction. Plus and negative is the same thing as minus. And then combining like terms is our next step. We have 2a terms. 8a minus 2a is 6a. And then we can add 3 to both sides, and that gives us 6a equals 3a plus 4. Subtract 3a from both sides, and that gives us 3a equals 4. And now we get the a term by itself, not the a term, but a by itself, by dividing both sides by 3, and we get a equals 4/3 because the 3's on the left cancel. So pause the video and go ahead and work the next problem. Okay, you should have gotten h equals 7, and to check your work, let's go ahead and plug 7 back in. 5 times, instead of h in the original equation, we're putting 7. And that should be a minus. So 5 times, and then 7 minus 4 is 3. 3 times 7 is 21. So we have 15 plus 2 should equal 17, and it does, so it checks. Nobody likes fractions. I'm going to show you a nice way to get rid of fractions so that you can solve the equation more easily, and that is by multiplying everything on both sides of the equation by the least common denominator. I'm going to work this problem and then you work the next one. Okay, in this case we have a denominator of 7 and a denominator of 5. They're both prime numbers, so the least common denominator is going to be 7 times 5, or 35. So we multiply everything by 35. Now when I say everything, that means every term. So let's review what a term is. This is actually a term because it's something times something. It's not something plus something. Now, we do have a plus sign here, but because of these parentheses, what's inside the parentheses is considered 1 unit, and so you have the 1/7 times that 1 unit. That's important because we're going to multiply every term by 35. Now, when you multiply fractions by a whole number, you need to change the whole number to a fraction. So what I said we're going to do is we're going to multiply all of this by 35, and on the left that means we're going to say 35 over 1 times 1/7 times 3u plus 2 minus, and then another fraction, because fractions need to be multiplied by fractions, and that should have been black. Let me redo that. Okay, and u plus 4 equals, and then on the right, since we're multiplying two whole numbers together, we don't need to do fractions. We can keep it as a whole number, 35 times the 2 that was already over there. Okay, let's look at the left. In 35 over 1 times 1/7, we can reduce. 7 goes into 35 5 times. So we're left with, in the numerator, 5 times 1 is 5, and in the denominator we're left with 1. So the denominator essentially goes away, and we have the whole number 5. So you see how that cleared that fraction? Instead of the 1/7 up here, we now have a 5. So we're going to multiply that 5 by 3u plus 2. Now let's look at the second fraction. 5 goes into 35 7 times, so we have 7 times u plus 4, and then on the right, 35 times 2 is 70. So now we've gotten rid of our fractions. We can go ahead and use our distributive property. Okay, now in the case I did minus 7u, but I have to be careful with that negative sign. So remember, we changed subtraction to addition. So minus 7u is actually plus a negative 7u when we multiply the negative 7 times the u. And now we're going to carry down this plus, and we're going to multiply negative 7 times 4, which gives us negative 28. So now we're going to combine like terms. 15u minus 7u gives us 8u, and 10 minus 28 gives us negative 18, which we'll go ahead and write as minus 18. Now we just add 18 to both sides. You should be getting used to that by now. That gives us 8u, 8u on the left equals 88, and when we divide by 8, we get u equals 11. So it's important to plug that back into our original equation, and I want to do that with the fractions present. So let's look again at what our original equation is. Here's our original equation, and instead of u, we're going to plug in 11. So I'm going to write it above the equation. We get 1/7 times, and then 3 times 11 is 33 plus 2 minus 1/5 times 11 plus 4 is 15 equals 2. So 33 plus 2 is 35. Then 1/7 of 35, I'm going to write it in blue up there. Actually, I'm going to go over here and write 1/7 times 35, which is 35 over 1, because we are dealing with fractions. So 7 goes into 35 5 times. So coming back over here, we know that 1/7 of 35 is 5 minus, and then 1/5 of 15, 1/5 times 15, we come over here and we'll write it in black this time. 1/5 times 15 over 1. The 5's cancel, leaving a 3. So we know that 1/5 of 15 is 3. So 5 minus 3 should equal 2, and it does. So we know that our answer, u does equal 11, is correct. Go ahead and work the other problem on the top of page 3, and then compare your answer. On this problem, you're to find the least common denominator. So let me show you how to do that. Write down your denominators in a column, and then factor them. 3 is already factored, 2 is already factored, but 6 is 3 times 2. And then you want to circle every occurrence of a number. So 3 occurs in top and bottom. You only circle it once. Every unique occurrence of a number gets circled once. So 2 occurs in 2 places, and you only circle it once. Now you multiply together what you have circled, and that's your least common denominator. Okay, so now we're going to multiply everything by 6. 6 over 1 times 2/3 x minus 6 over 1 times 1/2 x equals 6 over 1 times negative 1/6 x minus, and then don't forget to multiply your 2 by 6, and this time it doesn't have to be a fraction. Okay, so looking at the left term, 3 goes into 6 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4, so we write 4, and don't forget your x, and then the minus. 2 goes into 6 3 times, so we have 3x equals, and then you have 6 goes into 6 one time, so you end up with 1 there and that negative sign. So negative 1x is the same as negative x, and then you have minus 6 times 2 is 12. Okay, so let's get our variables to one side. So we have 5x minus 3x equals negative 12. Combining the left side, we get 2x equals negative 12, and then dividing by 2, we get x equals negative 6, and I'll leave it to you to plug that back into the original equation and make sure it's true. When you have an equation with decimals in it, you can clear the decimals by multiplying by the biggest place value. For instance, if you have 0.05 like it shows here, then you would multiply that by 100 and it would become 5. And if it's 0.6, you multiply by 10. Now notice 0.6, 6 is in the 10th place, so you multiply by 10, and 0.055 is in the 100th place, so you multiply by 100. So in your first equation, let's see, I'm going to do the second, no, either one is fine. So in the first equation, you have a 10th and a 100th. So 100 is larger than 10, 100 is larger than 10, so we're going to multiply everything by 100. When you multiply a decimal by a factor of 10, then you count the number of zeros. There are 2 zeros. You move the decimal to the right, 2 zeros. So in the first case, 100 times 0.02, you move the decimal here to the right 2 places, and that gives you 200, or 20 actually. 1, 2 will give you 20. So let's write it out. If you write it out with some trailing zeros and you move this decimal 1, 2 places to the right, you get 20. So on the left we have 20b minus, and then 100 times 0.03 is going to be 3, because you move the decimal 2 places to the right, and you get 3. And then in the right you get negative 6 times 31. Okay, now we use the distributive property, so we have 20v minus 33 minus 3v. Okay, a quick aside, what I did was I took this minus here and I changed it to a plus by changing the sign of the 3 and adding a line, and then when I multiplied negative 3 times 11, I get negative 33. Negative 3 times v is negative 3v. And on the right, I get negative 6 times 31, which is negative 186. So 20v minus 3v on the left is 17v. Let's add 33 to both sides, and I get 17b equals negative 153, and then I divide both sides by 17, and I get v equals negative 9. So we're going to check our work by plugging negative 9 in for v, and if you're not comfortable enough with decimals, you can just use your calculator to do this part, and you'll find that it checks, and so your answer is v equals negative 9. So go ahead and work the next problem. Solving this problem, you will find that t equals 16, and you can plug it back into your original equation to check your answer.